Test 1, Exam Practice. Listening, Section 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a woman and a man who works for a holiday company about a holiday she would like to go on. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Holidays for you. Sean speaking. Can I help you?
Oh, hi. I've been looking at your website. I'm interested in a cycling holiday in Austria in April.
We have 2 trips in April. One lasts 14 days and the other 10 days.
I think the 10-day trip is better. So let's see. I've got a calendar here. What are the dates?
The length of the trip that the woman chooses is 10 days, so 10 has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Holidays for you. Sean speaking. Can I help you?
Oh, hi. I've been looking at your website. I'm interested in a cycling holiday in Austria in April.
We have 2 trips in April. One lasts 14 days and the other 10 days.
I think the 10-day trip is better. So let's see. I've got a calendar here. What are the dates?
Well, that trip is in the middle of the month. It starts on the 17th of April and it finishes on the 27th.
That suits me. I can't leave work before the 10th of April.
Let me see if there are any spaces. Is it just for yourself?
Myself and my sister, so 2 of us.
Yes, we have spaces.
Is it a big group?
At the moment, there are 12 people booked on this trip, and with you 2, that will be 14. The maximum number is 16, so it's almost fully booked. We can't go over that because it's hard to keep a larger group together.
I need to check that I'm fit enough for this, but the distances look okay. The website says we'll ride approximately 45 kilometres a day. Is that right?
That's correct, and I've got the exact distances here. It really depends on which part of the trip. Some days are only 35 kilometres, and some are more, but you'll never have to cycle more than 50 kilometres in one day.
Oh, okay. I can manage that. And we stay in hotels?
Yes, they all have restaurants, and the rooms have ensuite facilities.
And do they have pools? It's how I relax after a long day.
There is a swimming pool in a few of the hotels, but none of them has a gym.
I don't think we'll need a gym after all that cycling. I'd better find out how much the holiday costs before I get too excited.
Including flights, it's £1,177 for one person.
Oh, we'll book our own flights on the internet.
That's just £1,013 then. And we can book insurance for you if you want.
And which meals are included in that price?
Well, breakfast, of course, and the hotels will provide you with a packed lunch each day. We do stop during the afternoon in a village somewhere for a rest, so any snacks you buy then are extra. Then dinner will be in the hotel every evening, and that's included in the price of the holiday.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
And you provide the bicycles, of course. What else?
A lock and a bell come with the bike, as well as lights, although you shouldn't need to cycle in the dark. There's a small bag, or pannier, on the front of the bike, where you can put the things you want to take with you during the day, like water or fruit. But we won't allow you to cycle unless you bring a helmet. We don't provide these locally because, like walking boots on a walking holiday, it's really important it fits properly.
OK.
If there's any special gear you need for your holiday, we recommend a particular website, and you can get a discount by quoting your booking reference.
Great. What is it?
It's www.ballantine.com. That's all one word, and I'll spell it for you. www.ballantine.com.
Good. I've got that down. I've been looking at your website while we've been talking. I see we cycle along the River Danube.
Yes, it's one of Europe's most well-known areas for cycling.
It looks fascinating. Lots of beautiful countryside and things to see.
I should warn you that we do reserve the right to make some alterations to the route if the weather is bad. Some of the tracks sometimes get very muddy.
OK. Well, hopefully it won't rain too much. I know we stop in towns and villages, but do we get a chance to look around? Because I'm really interested in history.
Oh yes, you get opportunities to explore. Is there something in particular you want to see?
There's a theatre in a town called Grine. A friend of mine went there last year and said it was amazing.
Let's see. Yes, there's a guide who'll take you round the building. We don't have any other tours arranged, but you can visit several castles and museums on the holiday.
Well, thank you for all that information. I'd like to book that then.
Right, well, I'll just...
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Test 1, Exam Practice. Listening, Section 2. You will hear someone talking on the radio about food and restaurants in the local area. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen and answer questions 11 to 14.
And now we have our Know Your Town section, where we look at what's on offer in our area. Today, John Munro is going to tell us about local food and eating out. John.
Well, most of us buy our food in supermarkets these days, but we're very lucky having a wonderful market here. It was originally on the piece of land in front of the cathedral, but at the beginning of the 20th century, it was moved to a site by the river. When the new shopping centre was built in the 1960s, it found a home beneath the multi-storey car park, where it still is, but there are plans to move it back to its previous home by the river. The market is now open 6 days a week. On Tuesday to Saturday, you can buy fresh fruit and vegetables, meat and cheese from the area, as well as a whole range of imported produce. But if you come on a Sunday, you'll find a different market, where craftspeople sell what they have made, things like bags, cards, clothes. During the week, there are a few stalls selling more everyday utensils like saucepans and cleaning products alongside the fruit and vegetables, as well as one new stall selling antique furniture, which is proving to be very popular. People often ask what our local dish is. As we're by the sea, they expect it to be some kind of fish recipe. Our fish is good, of course, but there isn't one particular dish that stands out. What we do have is an apple cake that isn't really made anywhere else. There's a new cafe in the high street, Bartons, which bakes them fresh every morning and serves them with delicious homemade ice cream in a choice of flavours. Now, the harbour is obviously the place to buy fresh fish. Every morning there's a stall where local fishermen sell a selection of the day's catch before the rest goes to London or abroad. They've been doing that for as long as anyone can remember, of course, but the harbour itself looks very different from a few years ago. Most of the restaurants used to be at the far end, but that part was redeveloped and the restaurants had to relocate to the other end. Many of them are simply the old ones in new premises, but a couple of new ones have opened recently, so there's a good range now, both in the harbour and the town itself. I'm now going to give you my top 6 places to eat in different parts of the town.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
So, number 1 for me is Merivale's, which is in one of the busiest parts of the town leading down to the harbour. It's in a side street, so it doesn't look out over the water, but it's very close, so you can take a walk after your meal and find one of the cafes with live music. At Merivale's, you can enjoy delicious fresh fish and seafood. The friendly staff offer very attentive service and a really enjoyable evening. The Lobster Pot is on the main road going down to the harbour, so it also misses out on the sea view, but the food makes up for that. It serves a huge range of fish and seafood, as well as vegetarian and meat dishes, so there's something for everyone. Prices are from mid-range to fairly expensive, so it's really only for a special occasion. Elliot's is in the city centre and is a very upmarket restaurant in the evening, but during the day it serves lunch and coffee. It's on the 20th floor above some offices, and it's a great place to sit for a while, as you can see most of the city spread out from there. It does get very busy though, and you may have to wait to be served. Not far from the city centre is the Cabin, which is on the canal bank. You can't park your car there. It's a 15-minute walk from the nearest car park, but it's very peaceful. A good place to relax away from the traffic. It's not cheap, but it's an ideal place for a long lunch. The Olive Tree is a family-run restaurant in the city centre offering beautifully prepared Greek dishes. It's well known locally and very popular. Service can be slow when it's busy, as all the food is freshly made. There's plenty of room, and on Friday and Saturday nights, the wooden floors resound with live music and dancing, which is certainly worth going for. The last place I want to recommend has only just opened in a converted school building. The old school restaurant has been very cleverly renovated. The use of mirrors, plants and the colours on the walls makes you feel as though you're in a large garden instead of the city centre. There are only a few dishes on the menu, but they change every day. So, Tanya,
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Test 1. Exam practice. Listening, section 3. You will hear 3 students on a media studies course talking about a film they are planning to make. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Razor. This is Helen.
Hello.
We're really pleased you've agreed to join us on this film project.
Yes, your experience is going to be so useful.
Well, I hope so. It's the technical side I know best. Lighting, sound and stuff.
But you think the script is okay?
Yes, I think it's great. Have you decided where you're going to shoot?
Well, there's the watermill scene at the end, and we've thought about some locations in town we can use. They're behind the shopping mall and on a couple of residential streets, and in an empty shop on campus. It means we don't have to worry about getting permission from a shop owner.
So, do you think we should go to all the locations with you?
It would be a good idea. We need to talk about the levels of background noise so we know they're all going to be reasonable places to film.
But the sounds of traffic will make it more natural.
I think Razor means things like aeroplanes, trains and so on that would mean we have to stop filming.
Exactly. And also, I'll make notes for myself about what lighting I'm going to need. I think the university department has a good range of equipment, but I'll need to make a list for each location for my own reference. Anyway, once we've had a look round, you can do the roadworks check.
What do you mean?
You need to find out about building work or road works, because you could start filming one day and come back in the morning to find one of the roads has been dug up. The local council have to be informed about things like that, so you can find out from them.
Okay. Then I think we need to work from the script and put together a list of all the scenes and decide which ones we're going to film when. We need to prepare the shooting schedule day by day.
You're right. Then, when you know how long filming is going to last, you can tell everyone when they're needed.
Okay, so as soon as we can, we'll audition, and then when we contact people to offer them parts, we can send the exact dates and make really sure they're free. Because often the actors are all enthusiastic, but then when you try to pin them down about whether they're really free at that time, you find they've got exams or something, or they're off to a festival just before, and you have to rush about looking for replacements.
Then we need people who can take over the main parts if one of our stars falls ill or something.
Yes, I agree. So offer the main parts to the people we really want, and then look at other volunteers who were okay.
Yes. We can select the understudies once the main roles have been confirmed. So, once we've got that sorted, and we've held all the rehearsals of the main scenes, we'll be ready to start filming.
Yes, that sounds good. Anything else?
Well, just housekeeping, really. We don't actually need costumes because actors will wear their own clothes. My family has agreed to lend us some pieces of furniture which we need, so we'll go and fetch those the weekend before we start.
We'll provide food and drink during shooting, so I'm going to borrow some cool boxes.
And I've got a little van. Most of the locations are within walking distance of the halls of residence anyway. The only one further away is the watermill.
Ah, yes. Can you tell me about that?
Okay. Hang on a minute. I'll get my notes. There's a plan in them.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Here's the mill. You see, basically you have a vertical water wheel which was used to power the grinding stones.
It sounds really interesting. Will we film inside?
Yes, that's where the final scene between the girl and the man takes place. Our plan is to fix one camera outside by the window next to the door to film through the window, and then have another handheld camera inside the mill. That means we can get two views of the same scene. We were going to do something using a mirror, but we decided that would be too complicated.
Yes, by doing it that way, all we'll need is lights on the inside, next to the wall behind the wheel, which can shine across to the opposite wall.
Will that give enough light?
I think so, because the scene is in the evening. It shouldn't be too bright. The actors will be carrying torches too.
And we'll have an old screen made of wood just inside the door, because it's a new door and it'll look wrong. The lights won't shine directly on it, so it'll be fine.
So you won't actually show the door open?
No. There's a huge box on the floor against the wall farthest from the wheel. We'll see the girl approaching the mill on her bike. Then we see through the window and the man is inside looking at it. Then the next shot is the girl in the room with him opening the box.
So it'll be a mysterious ending.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be a great project.
Good.
Thanks.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Test 1. Exam practice. Listening, section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about exotic pests given as the introduction to a course on ecology and environment. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Pause the recording for 1 minute.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon. I want this afternoon, as an introduction to our ecology module, to offer examples of exotic pests, non-native animals or plants which are, or may be, causing problems, which might prove a fruitful topic for seminar papers later in the term. People and products are crisscrossing the world as never before. And on these new global highways, plants and animals are travelling too. Exotic plants and animals are turning up in Antarctica and on the most remote islands on Earth. For example, the Australian red-backed spider. It's made its way to countries fairly near home, such as New Zealand and Japan, as some of you may know. Well, it's also been found on Tristan da Cunha, which is a remote island thousands of miles from anywhere, way out in the middle of the Atlantic. Now, another famous animal invader in the other direction, so to speak, from England to Australia in the southern hemisphere, is the rabbit. This was in 1830, and it might seem less of a threat, but it became an extraordinarily destructive pest. The fact that rabbits increased so rapidly is perhaps more understandable when we remind ourselves that they had originally been introduced to England from continental Europe 8 centuries earlier. This was because they were regarded as a luxury food source, and in spite of having warm fur, they probably originated on the hot, dry plains of Spain, which of course explains why they thrive in the climate of Australia. A much less cuddly example of a pest introduced to Australia, this time from America, is fire ants. These are increasing and spreading very fast. Their huge nests can now be found in gardens in the city of Brisbane, and they are costing the Australian government a great deal of money in control measures. These were an accidental introduction, rather than a deliberate one, brought to Australia, probably in horticultural imports or in mud on second-hand machinery. As a biologist and conservationist, I have become increasingly concerned about these matters. Exotic invasions are irreversible and deserve to be taken more seriously, even when they aren't particularly damaging. For example, something that is not necessarily a major disaster compared to other ecological experiments. In 1975, an Australian species of earthworm, was deliberately introduced to the Northern Hemisphere, in Scotland, because they were bigger than the natives. The aim was that they would be more effective than native species, but in fact they don't do more for the soil condition than the smaller locals which they displace. Although they don't do a lot of harm, as far as we know up to now, this will probably prove to have been a mistake. A much more serious case, also in Scotland, as well as other countries, along with the latest victim Iceland, is the New Zealand flatworm. This is a most unwelcome newcomer in these regions of northwest Europe. Basically, this flatworm came into these countries by accident. It's now been realised that it was actually carried in the plant pots containing exotic ornamental shrubs and so on, and as it eats local earthworms and doesn't benefit the local ecology in any way, it is a real pest. Next, there's a further instance, this time in the water, and it's come from Japan. It's a delicious but very fast-spreading seaweed, and is one of many exotic species, large and small, in the seas covering the rocks around Australia. Unfortunately, it is replacing indigenous seaweeds and permanently altering the ecosystem. However, to look at the situation from a business point of view, it is now being harvested and exported, dried, back to Japan, its original home, where it's particularly popular. So, sometimes we may find accidental benefits from apparently harmful arrivals. Well, you could say that world ecology is now going the same way as popular culture. Global music and fashions, food and drinks are taking over from local ones in every land. And in ecosystems, we find vigorous exotic invaders overwhelming native species and natural habitats. But can we find any examples of invaders which appear to be a problem and then find that in fact they may not be such a big issue after all? We might take as an example a native of Australia, the budgerigar, the most common pet parrot in the world, of course. Because there have been many escapes over the years, it is now to be found flying about in feral flocks where the climate suits it. So, these flocks of budgerigars have been getting very numerous in the southeast of the United States, particularly in residential areas. People have been getting quite worried about this, but it has been observed that the size of the flocks has diminished somewhat recently. The fact that they are smaller is thought to be due to the fact that new competitors for their habitat have arrived from other places. That's the last example for now. What I'd like you to consider is this. Is the planet Earth moving towards a one-world ecosystem? How far would it be a wholly bad development?
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Trainer 2, published by Cambridge University Press and UCLES 2019. This recording is copyright. Exam practice. Test 1. Listening, Part 1. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. You will hear a phone conversation between the manager of a community centre and a woman who is inquiring about art classes in the centre. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Bramley Community Centre, how can I help?
Oh, hi. I'm calling about the art classes that the centre offers. I had a quick look at your website. I think one of the classes is called something like Movement and Light.
That's right. The focus is on painting in the style of the French Impressionists.
Yes, I saw that in the description. But I've got a few questions if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, do I need to bring anything to the class or is everything supplied?
Not quite. What you'd need to do is get yourself some brushes. I'd suggest a range of them, in different sizes.
All right. Yes, I guess it would make sense to bring your own. I'll make a note of that.
And you know what the fee for the class is?
For one term, it's $170, isn't it?
That's right. But if you sign up for 2 terms, it actually works out cheaper.
How much would that be?
$285. And we do find that a lot of people sign up for a couple of terms. It's such a great class.
OK, I'll give it some thought. And that's on Monday evenings, isn't it?
Yes, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. in room 15.
And who's the tutor?
The tutor? He's a local artist. You might have heard of him. Steve Ramdani.
Oh, possibly. How do you spell that surname?
It's R-A-M-D-H-A-N-I-E. Got that?
Yes, thanks. Now you've also got a class called Clay Basics. It's a pottery class, right?
Yes, that's right.
Do we get to use a pottery wheel?
Yes, you do.
Oh, great. But we'd be making something simple, I hope. I can't imagine producing a vase or anything with a handle.
No, in the first term, you'd just be producing 2 or 3 bowls. That means learning how to shape and glaze them.
Sounds great. I guess it would be a bit of a messy activity. You wouldn't want to wear your smart clothes, would you?
Best not to. I'd recommend wearing something old, that you didn't mind getting dirty.
Well, I have a shirt like that I could use. I'd just roll up the sleeves, I guess.
And the fee for that class is $180 per term.
All right.
And the class runs on Wednesdays, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Oh, hang on. I've got that wrong.
It's on a Thursday, isn't it?
Yes, my mistake. What else can I tell you? Oh, yes. The tutor's name is Teresa Clark. Her work's on display in reception here.
Oh, great. I'll have a look.
Yeah, if you've got time.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Now the other class I thought looked interesting was sketching architecture.
Oh, yes, for that one, everyone goes down to the local park because it's surrounded by so many beautiful old buildings.
Oh, right. Like the old post office.
Well, I think you begin by drawing the library. There's a good view of it from the park, I believe.
OK, nice. Actually, come to think of it, I think I've seen the sketching class down in the park when I've driven past. Don't they all take a fold-up chair with them?
I believe so.
Is there anything else I ought to know?
Well, the people who do the class, they tend to make a sandwich for themselves and bring that along. So I'd recommend you do that too.
Good idea. I get grumpy when I'm hungry.
All right. That's $160 per term for that class, and it's on Fridays from 11 a.m. till 1.
So, if the classes are in the park, that's quite a big area. Where do we actually meet?
Good point. Everyone usually heads along just before 11 a.m. and they meet each other at the top of Victoria Street, at the station road end.
So, on the corner? Great. And the tutor is?
Annie Lee.
You know what? I'll have to think about the other two, but I'd definitely like to enrol for Annie's class. I'm happy to pay now.
In that case, you're going to need Annie's cell phone number in case you're running late or the class gets cancelled.
I see. OK, what's the number, please?
It's 021 785 6361. Just text her if there's a problem. Now, how would you like to pay? We can do cash or maybe...
That is the end of part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers. Training Test 1. Listening Part 2. Useful language. Plan and map labelling. Exercise 2. Listen and check your answers. 1.
As you can see, Student Services is at the bottom of your plan. To the right of Student Services is a row of 3 lecture halls. The Albert Lecture Hall is the one in the centre.
2.
The Arts block is directly below the Science block and just above the Student Services building.
3.
See the 2 L-shaped buildings at the top of the plan in the right-hand corner? The main library is the smaller of those 2 buildings.
4.
The sports complex is easy to find. See the circular running track at the top of the map? On the left of that are 2 long rectangular buildings. The sports complex is the one nearest to the running track.
5.
The cafe is well situated on the campus. In between the science block and the car park, there's a square-shaped building complex where many seminars take place. And in the centre of that building complex, you can find the cafe.
6.
The nursery is in a nice spot. It's that building to the south of the car park, the one that's surrounded by trees.
Exam practice. Test 1. Listening, Part 2. Now turn to Section 2. You will hear the manager of a factory talking to office staff about renovation work at the factory complex. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to say thank you for your patience for the last 6 months. As you know, all the office staff had to move to temporary offices while the renovation work at the factory complex was taking place. But finally, that work is finished, and everyone can return to the factory complex and their new office space. We're hoping everything will go smoothly, but there's a couple of things we'll need you to do during your first week back. You'll be pleased to know that your files and folders have been placed at your desk, so there's no need for you to go hunting around for any records. A couple of people have asked whether their old pass will still work at the security gate, or will they need to get their photo done and update their personal details? I can assure you that the old pass will still get you through the gate, no problem. Once you've had a chance to settle into the new offices, please take the time to view a training video for the operating system we're now using. We think it's going to manage all our programs far more efficiently. Obviously, the sooner you can get this done, the better. Also for next week, because the renovations have meant a complete redesign of some of the company's buildings, you'll need to attend a session on things like what to do if you hear the fire alarm go off and where to meet if you have to evacuate the buildings. We'll let you know as soon as we have a definite time for that. It's going to be a busy week for everyone, but hopefully the kind of challenge that can help bring the team together. We'll make a time for you to report back to me on Friday. All right. We've also taken some steps to improve the physical environment in your offices. Bigger windows mean that the offices are a lot brighter, and that's better for your eyes. We've also invested in some adjustable chairs. You can lower or raise them to whatever height feels right for you. What else? We've now got some quality insulation in the ceilings and walls that'll make everything a lot warmer. Also, another thing, we've set aside several rooms for project work. That will allow a team to get together around the same table. We feel that more opportunities for face-to-face discussion will benefit the whole company. So, when you have had time...
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
OK, so let's look at a plan of the factory complex and see how it's changed. You can see that the main entrance is at the top of the map. Ellerslie Road is on the left-hand side and the warehouse is at the bottom. OK, let's start with one of the new buildings. The conference centre, perhaps. If you look at the lower half of your plan, on the right, there are two long buildings that are parallel to each other. The conference centre is the one with a view of the river. Hopefully that's something visitors to the factory complex will appreciate, especially on a sunny day when it's clear outside. Now, what about the new office space? As you know, the offices used to be in that large building right alongside Ellerslie Road, and that could get a bit noisy at times. So what we've done is move the office space further away from the road, into the building that directly joins on to reception. This should mean employees can benefit from a quieter working environment, as well as the other improvements I mentioned earlier. We also decided to move the stores building, so it could be a lot closer to the warehouse. So now, if you were going to enter the factory complex from the Ellerslie Road entrance, stores would be the building immediately on your left. The warehouse staff have already commented that having the stores here is much more convenient. Yes, I'm sure it's going to save a lot of time. Finance was another building that had to be relocated. They just didn't have enough space before. So you can see the main entrance on the plan, right? And below that is the roundabout. Then there's the road that goes from the roundabout directly to reception. Well, the finance building is about halfway along that road. On the plan, the factory is just above it. The cafe, just so you know, is in the same place as before. It's not ideally located for the factory workers, that's true, but it's not too far if you're heading down from reception or up from the warehouse. But what we've done is try to make the environment a bit more pleasant. So whereas before you looked straight from the cafe onto the large car park, now there's a line of trees separating them. I think you'll agree that this was a good decision. Putting in the trees, I mean. It was also necessary to relocate the IT department. Of course, for some of their work, they can do it remotely, but from time to time, the IT people do need to visit the different buildings around the factory complex. For that reason, we've given the IT department a more central location. It's that square building you see right in the centre of the plan, one of the closest buildings to the larger car park. Something I'd like to say about the car park, actually.
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Training Test 1, Listening Part 3. Vocabulary Exercise 2. Complete the flowchart. The history of antibiotics in Exercise 1 by choosing from options A to I.
So I think it was in 1928, wasn't it, that Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. And whereas before, if people had a cut that went septic, say on their hand, or a sore throat, they knew it could potentially kill them. Penicillin changed all that. You could recover really quickly if you were treated with penicillin, so people weren't so frightened anymore.
And then chloramphenicol was discovered after penicillin, and these antibiotics were so successful that pharmaceutical companies really began to take notice. They thought that if they could go out and find new antibiotics, the financial gain would be enormous, and so...
And because of that, the companies hired hundreds of people and sent them out to places like jungles and mountains. And their job was to collect specimens from the soil. Specimens that would hopefully contain the kind of microorganisms that could help the companies create new antibiotics.
And so, because it was so expensive and so time-consuming, and they hadn't really achieved anything, manufacturers in the US and in Europe gave up on that approach. And instead, they decided to make artificial kinds of antibiotic. Try and reproduce them in the laboratory, I mean.
And since the 1970s, almost no new antibiotics have been made. And that's why doctors and surgeons are just prescribing the same ones again and again, even if they know they aren't really going to work.
And according to the research I read, there's about 700,000 people a year now who, well, when they get sick, and it could be a small thing or a major illness, they don't get better when they're given antibiotics. And this kind of drug resistance is becoming more common.
Exam Practice Test 1, Listening, Part 3. You will hear 2 health studies students, Lucy and Sam, talking about the topic of vitamin supplements. First, you have time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
OK, we've looked at the history of vitamin supplements and thought about why people take them. We've also considered the reasons why some health professionals are critical of the vitamin supplement industry. Now work with a partner and discuss the key issues.
Sam, shall we work together?
Sure. Let's go over the history.
Well, before the 1900s, when someone became weak and tired, and it wasn't clear why, doctors assumed they were suffering from an infection, like a virus.
Or they'd been in contact with something poisonous or harmful, something they'd handled or eaten. Doctors had no other explanation for it.
But in the early 1900s, that changed. That researcher in the US, Joseph Goldberger, he realised people who basically lived off corn, they were getting ill because they weren't eating anything else.
Exactly. And other researchers were realising the same thing. Like in places where people only ate white rice, they were suffering from a disease called beriberi.
So the researchers concluded that there must be something missing, that the stuff some people were eating had no nutritional value. And from there, researchers began to identify vitamins, like A and B, for the first time.
A huge scientific breakthrough.
So doctors, the public, everyone got to hear about vitamins. First, that they existed, and second, you needed them to be healthy.
But it was governments that were really worried about vitamin deficiency, certainly in the US and in the UK at least.
What do you mean?
Well, in the 1930s, those governments were worried about people's general health because everyone was suddenly buying canned fruit, artificial butter, meat in tins, that kind of thing. It became very common, and so newspapers were featuring lots of government reports about how serious this was.
I see.
And then some people saw a business opportunity.
Naturally.
In the 1940s, companies started making and selling vitamin supplements in bottles, and they decided the easiest way to market them was to target housewives.
Why was that? Because housewives were responsible for keeping families healthy?
I'd say so. In the weekly magazines Housewives read, the companies made exaggerated claims about what the supplements could do, and they showed pictures of rats in a laboratory before and after they were given vitamins. The before pictures showed the rats looking very sick.
So they scared the housewives into buying their product?
Apparently.
But vitamins were still expensive, weren't they? It wasn't until the 1950s that more people could afford to buy them.
Why was that?
Well, manufacturers had discovered how to produce vitamins artificially and in enormous quantities in their factories.
I suppose that's what goes on with any product. It starts expensive until manufacturers adapt their technology. Were there any developments in the 1960s?
Companies changed their promotional strategy to increase their sales. They used movie stars to say how effective the supplements were.
That's still true today. Celebrity endorsement really seems to work. Someone on the TV says vitamins have made them healthier, and immediately more consumers go out and buy them.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So apparently, the number of Australians taking vitamin supplements has doubled in the last decade.
Incredible! I suppose so many fitness-related articles recommend them.
I wouldn't say that that's the reason. According to the research I read, many Australians are just taking a more active approach to staying well. They don't want to rely on their doctor for everything, so they're turning to vitamins. They can take those themselves and feel they're doing something positive. So it doesn't have anything to do with the fact the price has dropped because so many companies are making supplements.
I doubt it. Even people in lower socio-economic groups are buying them, apparently.
Most of my own research has been about the US vitamin supplement industry. Did you know the industry is under no obligation to prove that their supplements actually work? I don't think that's right.
How do you mean?
Well, in the US, the Food and Drug Administration Department regards vitamin supplements as a food. With medicine, manufacturers have to demonstrate that their products really can improve people's health before they go on sale.
But you said vitamins are classed as a food.
Yes, so the industry can sell whatever vitamin supplements they like. You know, this one will improve your brain function, even if there's nothing to support their claims.
That Danish experiment, thousands of people took part in that.
Yes, the scientists wanted to see if high doses of vitamins really could prevent medical problems like heart disease, or just reduce the chances of people getting a simple cold.
But the high-dose people were just as likely to get sick as the people not taking any vitamins. That's not to say that scientists now know everything about vitamins.
No. Like you say, investigations and long-term trials need to continue before they can be certain about what taking vitamin supplements can actually achieve.
But in the meantime, do we need stricter regulation of the supplement industry? Do you think people would stop buying and taking vitamins if they were told it's a waste of time?
Hardly. No one likes being told what they can or can't buy, especially where health is concerned.
Fair enough. I guess if the government made it harder to get certain products, like, say, fish oil with vitamin D, people would protest.
They certainly would. What I think is that they should start to...
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Exam practice. Test 1. Listening part 4. You will hear a student giving a presentation about the way that different insect species are being threatened. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
So today, I'm going to be talking about the way that different insect species are being threatened. In other words, the reasons why some insect populations are declining and might even become extinct in the 21st century. I'll also talk about the consequences if extinction occurs and some possible ways to prevent that. Let's start with the reasons. First of all, when we look at what's going on in Europe, we can see a huge decline in certain species of insect. This is partly because farmers no longer allow certain plants to grow in their fields. But farmers are not entirely to blame. The gardens that people have nowadays don't always contain the kind of plant that insects need. So perhaps we need to rethink what we're putting there. In more tropical regions of the world, for example, the Amazon rainforest, scientists have noticed that the number of beetle and butterfly species also appears to be diminishing. They put this down to climate change, rather than, say, the fragmentation of habitat, but more research has to be done. And then there's the use of pesticide. And of course, this happens everywhere in the world. Pesticide is designed to kill a range of insects that farmers don't like, but it also kills bees, which they need. Pesticide might not kill bees directly, but we know that it impacts on their spatial skills, meaning they cannot make sense of what they see around them, and also their memory. This means that they cannot remember how to get back to their hive. So, why worry about whether insects become extinct? Well, the consequences would obviously be terrible, not just for them, but for us. Pretty much everywhere on the planet, with the exception of Antarctica, insects are at the bottom of the food chain. They're absolutely vital, because if there were no insects, there would also be no birds or lizards or mammals. Then there's the role that insects play in crop production. We use them to pollinate our fruit and vegetables, and it would be impossible to manage without them. It's also worth remembering that scientists are now studying plants to find out whether they might be a source of medicine in the future. If these plants disappear because of insect extinction, that would be another lost opportunity. So, there's some possible ways we could prevent insect extinction, some more controversial than others. I think it's a given that governments have to do something about the sale of pesticides. In fact, some countries have already passed laws to ban certain products. That's a good move forward. But ordinary people can also make a difference. If we cut down on how much meat we ate, some of the land now used for grazing could be turned back into insect-friendly environments. I'd like to finish with a positive story. There's a place in California called the Antioch Dunes. In the 1900s, people looked at the dunes and the sand that formed them and thought, that sand is a great raw material. And because they needed to build houses, they removed tons and tons of the sand and turned it into bricks. It wasn't really until the 1960s that biologists suddenly realised that the Antioch Dunes had actually been home to some unique species of plant and insect. But by this time, there was only one species of butterfly left, the metalmark butterfly. And a major problem for the metalmark was that it required a certain plant to survive, something called the naked stem buckwheat. It was on this plant that it laid its eggs, so yes, you can see why the buckwheat was important. Well, in the end, the only way that the biologists could get the buckwheat to start growing properly was to replace the sand. That was a great first step, but the metalmark butterfly is still endangered. In the last decade, a significant number of butterflies and plants have been destroyed in the Antioch Dunes by fire. So now, the biologists are limiting the number of visitors who can wander around the dunes. That's fair enough, I think. All right, the final point I want to make about the project to restore the Antioch Dunes area is to do with how much land is required. When we think about the concept of conservation, we often assume we need to set aside a large amount of it. And that might be true for some large species. But in this case, relatively little land was required. But the important thing is to leave it undisturbed. OK, now what I want to talk about.
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Trainer 2, published by Cambridge University Press and IELTS 2019. This recording is copyright. Exam Practice Test 5, Listening, Part 1. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. You will hear a conversation between a man who wants to make an insurance claim and a woman who works for an insurance company. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good morning, Star Insurance. How can I help?
Oh, good morning. I'm calling to make an insurance claim. It's for damage to my house.
All right. I'm just going to get a few details down first. What's your name, please?
It's Greg Williams.
OK, thank you. And what's your policy reference, please?
Is that the long number with the letters in the middle?
That's right.
It's 05443 CHI 771.
OK. Right, yes, I've got your details on the computer now. So, can I confirm your address? According to our records, you live at 102 Market Street in Northbridge. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, good. And the last thing I need to check, what's the best phone number to get you on? Is it the number you're calling on now?
No, I'm calling from work. Let me give you my mobile phone number. It's 018 669 925.
Thanks. So, can you give me a description of the damage? When did the incident occur?
Sunday, the 17th of June.
I see. And what was the cause of the incident? How did the damage happen?
Right. No one was home at the time, which was fortunate, I suppose. There was a big storm, and I guess it blew down one of the trees at the back of our garden, and it smashed through the window in our daughter's bedroom.
Yes, a good thing you were all out. So, have you got the window fixed?
Not yet.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
All right. And so, apart from the window, what are you claiming for?
OK, like I said, it was my young daughter's room. Anyway, right below the window is her desk. That's all right, but she'd left her glasses on it, and they got really badly scratched. She'll need a new pair. Luckily, she hadn't left her headphones there, like she normally does.
Is there anything else?
Yes, because the window was broken, the rain got in. And what's really annoying is that, when was it? Just last month, we'd gone shopping and bought a carpet. We'd only had it for a couple of weeks and it got soaked. We had to remove it.
Oh dear. Are there any other items you'd like to claim for?
Yes. I suppose we should be grateful that the rain didn't reach her computer, but when the tree came through the window, it tore a hole through the curtain that was hanging there.
OK, I'm making a note of all this.
And one more thing I need to claim for.
Yes, go on.
We've had some repairs done already, for a door we can't open.
To the back of the house?
No, it's for the garage. The tree hit that as well.
OK, so have you contacted a professional builder yet?
Yes, it's the same builder we always use. Do you want his name?
Yes, please.
OK, it's Stephen Honeywell. HONEYWELL.
All right. Now, apart from damage to the house itself, what else do you think the builder will be looking at? Because we're going to need photographs.
Oh, yes. Well, he'll be putting up a fence for us between our house and the neighbours, because the one we've got now was smashed by the tree. So I'll take some pictures before he does the work.
Please do that, and then you can send them in with your claim.
That is the end of part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers. Exam Practice Test 4. Listening Part 2. You will hear a woman who helps run a program called Young Explorer talking to participants. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
All right, shall we start? It's good to see so many people keen to participate in our Young Explorer programme. I think that at this meeting we have groups from 12 different high schools. I can promise you that while it's challenging, it's also going to be a lot of fun. The Young Explorer programme offers some unique opportunities to participants. During the programme, you'll be trekking through forests, or maybe mountain tracks, or perhaps kayaking along the coastline. It can be a tough few days, but this part of the programme really gives your group an occasion to work as a team. Some kind words and encouragement can go a long way, whether it's convincing someone they can walk the last 5 miles or helping them fit everything back inside their backpack. No one's in charge, it's all about cooperation, and please don't see it as a race. There are going to be moments when there is disagreement about which way to go or where to camp for the night, but here's the chance to listen properly to the opinions of others and reach a decision that's best for everyone. It's an opportunity not many other programs provide. Later this morning, you need to choose a weekend when you can attend some preliminary training. A number of practical subjects will be covered to ensure you get the most out of your 4-day trek. Now, everything you eat and drink, you'll have to take with you. You'll also have to use a portable stove and the fuel it requires. We'll make sure you know how to use that safely during the training session. We don't want you or the food to get burnt, or for you to accidentally set light to any trees. Training will also include learning how to read a map and use a compass, so you can head in the right direction. You'll also need to know how to put up a tent and where to put it. For example, putting it next to a river or stream might seem like a good idea, but there are plenty of reasons not to.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
OK, there are 6 tracks on your list, and your group can decide which track it wants to take. Each of them are about the same distance, but very different in other respects. The first one, North Face, that's one of my favourite tracks. It takes you high up into the mountains and the view is stunning. But we've just heard that some maintenance work is taking place, unfortunately, and so people aren't allowed to use it at the moment. But the other tracks are very interesting too. You've got Blue River, which I'd thoroughly recommend, but you need to keep an eye out when you're walking that track. It's easy to slip on the rocks when you're crossing the river, and you do have to cross it several times. Then there's Pioneer Track, which takes you through some native forest. You follow the track for about a day and a half, and then it comes to an end at a town called Richmond. It starts up again on the other side of town, and the rest of the route is along the coast. You might also consider Edgewater. You get to see some beautiful lakes and bird life. The only thing I'd say, though, is that it's very popular, and you'll probably come across a number of other groups out walking on the way. Number 5 on the list is the Murray Track. That one is certainly quite challenging. There are some very steep sections, and at some points you'd be walking right next to the cliff edge on a very narrow path. That's definitely a track where caution needs to be taken. Great views, though. And last but not least is Lakeside Track, which, as the name suggests, takes you along one of our biggest lakes. It has some terrific camping spots, but that also means it's a bit of a tourist attraction, and you could well be sharing the track with many other visitors. Anyway, it's up to you which track you decide to take.
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Exam Practice Test 5, Listening Part 3. You will hear a university tutor talking to 2 social science students about a project they are doing on the impact of technology on people's working lives. First, you have time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
OK, Kiara and Finn, can you tell me how your project is going? Your general topic was the future of work, wasn't it?
Yes, we've read a lot of articles on it. Some were more interesting than others. There were a couple of writers that just made some strong statements without really backing them up.
The problem is, it's such a big topic. Some of the articles were aimed at graduates, and some of them were targeting people who've been in work for years. We should have narrowed down our topic before we started searching.
But anyway, the focus was always the changing nature of jobs, how it's all happening so quickly.
Exactly. Every single article said we can forget the way things used to happen. Like, you started out as an apprentice, and then you stayed in the same company for years. That's over.
I see that you've highlighted job title in your notes. Why's that?
I think for some people, a job title used to define them. It was their identity. They worked their way up from the bottom, and eventually one day they became manager or head of department. And even in their social circle, outside of work, they wanted other people to know how long they'd been in a job.
And now?
It looks like we're moving away from the term job title. So, instead, a lot of businesses are hiring people to work on a project done or lead a team, but the contracts are temporary.
Finn, do you think that's a big issue for young people?
Having to move on once a project's finished? Not necessarily. It can be interesting to work in different places. People aren't always looking for a job that pays really well. It's more about gaining experience and creating a network.
So money's not important?
Well, I haven't started work myself, but according to all the articles I read, it's more about the different rates of pay. If you have a good salary, you probably have enough to enjoy life, but if you're only earning the minimum wage, how do you get by? That's my biggest worry.
I looked at that Richards-Greaves survey on work-life balance.
Oh, good.
Only 48% of people believe that their work-life balance will improve.
Is that a statistic that surprises you?
It's hard to say. I wonder what the survey actually asked. Was it just, will your work-life balance improve? Or did the interviewers break that down? I mean, did they actually ask the people who took part, do you enjoy spending more time at work than home?
Good point. See if you can find out more. Finn, what else have you been researching?
Learning new skills. The general view is that employers are just going to want their workers to constantly upskill. And apparently, employers will expect them to attend courses at weekends or after work, not as part of the working day.
I don't think that's a bad thing, as long as the company pays for it. And think about it. If you were smart, you'd study things that would help you if you had to change companies.
I hadn't thought about that. Yes, good thinking.
What about mobile technology? How might employees be affected now that phones and tablets make it possible to stay connected to work at all times?
It's great. You can use mobile technology, your device, to work where you like, on the way to class or the office.
The media often focuses on the negatives, but as far as I'm concerned, having a tablet I can carry with me means I can manage my studies and my family commitments more easily. I actually think that in the future, mobile technology will reduce employees' stress.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So, let's focus on the impact of artificial intelligence on jobs. To what extent do you think it'll help people in their professions or be a threat?
I was reading about architects using AI in the future. The writer was saying that one day, architects will use holograms. Then their clients could see a three-dimensional house rather than just looking at a flat plan.
As soon as one architect starts to use AI, all the rival architects in the same area will have to use AI too. That's the only way they'll manage to keep their clients.
True. How about doctors? Imagine if they had to give urgent medical attention to someone, but they weren't qualified to do it. A hospital specialist could use AI and virtual reality to guide a doctor through, like a complex procedure.
Yes! In an emergency situation, AI could really make the difference.
And what about the law?
Well, the lawyers I know are always anxious about the amount of work they have to get through. But AI could help them with a whole lot of routine tasks, and that should make some of that anxiety go away.
Yes, it probably could. Also, if you're a sports referee, that could be a job that's affected.
In what way?
Using AI would mean there were no mistakes. It would know for sure if a ball was out, for example.
And you can't accuse AI of bias.
No.
I can imagine that one day AI might do away with the need for human referees.
I think so too.
All right, let's move on to our next point.
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Exam practice, test 5, listening part 4. You will hear a lecturer giving a presentation about the Klondike Gold Rush. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I'm going to talk about an incredible event in the history of Canada, the Klondike Gold Rush. Between 1896 and 1899, over 100,000 people set out to seek gold in the Klondike region, a remote area in northwestern Canada. Only 4,000 people were actually successful. Let's start by considering the journey people had to take in order to reach the Klondike River and start looking for gold. For most gold seekers, their journey began in Alaska, in a town on the coast called Skagway. From Skagway, one option was to take the White Pass Trail through the mountains. It probably looked easy enough at the beginning of the trail, but rocks made it difficult to make progress. On top of this, the men and their horses got stuck in the thick mud that covered long sections of the trail. The other option was the Chilkoot Trail. Now, although this trail was only about 35 miles long, it took about 3 months for the gold seekers to cover this distance. This is because the trail was incredibly steep, and people had to make the same trip multiple times in order to transport their equipment. Most people really had very little idea about how difficult the journey was going to be. So, although 100,000 may have set out on those two trails, only about 30,000 got to the end. So yes, the majority gave up. Often they were suffering from starvation or disease. They also came to the terrible realization that their journey was likely to end in failure, and so they turned around. Anyway, for those gold seekers who did continue, they eventually reached Lake Bennett. They might have expected that their journey was going to become easier at this point, but no. Because the lake was frozen over, many people had to wait until spring before they could continue their journey. In the meantime, a tent was the only protection they had from the cold. While they were waiting, people cut down trees and made boats. Once the ice melted, they could sail across the lake and start down the Yukon River. Again, this wasn't the end of their troubles. Once they reached a point of the river called Miles Canyon, things became very dangerous indeed. Many boats were destroyed in the rapids. In order to proceed down the Yukon River, the gold seekers needed to employ a real sailor, someone who could steer their boats and get through the canyon safely. From here on, the worst was over, and the gold seekers could sail to a place called Dawson at the mouth of the Klondike River. So earlier on, I mentioned that gold seekers needed to make multiple trips up and down the two trails. This is because they had to transport an enormous amount of equipment. This equipment was set out on a very long list. It was actually the police who gave gold seekers the list, since they knew how unprepared many people were for the journey. People were obliged to take enough supplies to last them a year, so the list included clothing like boots and warm winter coats. There was also the food the gold seekers required. Perhaps items like tea weren't too hard to carry, but 400 pounds of flour would have been very heavy indeed. The gold seekers had to take a lot of tools as well, everything they needed for digging, for building, and so on. Things like rope were essential and could be packed away without too much difficulty. But imagine having to carry 2 or 3 buckets with you. All these things were compulsory. So, some people became very successful because of the gold rush, and not because they'd actually found gold themselves. Those who were business-minded saw many opportunities. They sold the supplies that the gold seekers needed. They established hotels and so on. And then there were people like Jack London. London was one of the gold seekers that actually survived the terrible journey, but he didn't find much gold. Still, he was inspired to write. Through his vivid description, his readers could share the feeling of adventure, even from the comfort of their armchair. Finally, it wasn't just men that tried to seek their fame and fortune. Many women also headed up the trails. Among them were Annie Hall Strong and Emma Kelly. In the U.S. and in other parts of Canada, ordinary citizens were keen to read about life in the Klondike. Working for different newspapers, Hall and Kelly often described their first-hand experience of danger and hardship. Another thing that needs to be discussed
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. IELTS Trainer 2, published by Cambridge University Press and IELTS 2019. This recording is copyright. Exam Practice Test 6, Listening, Part 1. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. You will hear a man who works in a tourist information office talking to a woman who wants information about tours. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Morning, Kingstown Tourist Information. This is David speaking. How can I help you?
Oh, hi. Look, I'm coming to Kingstown on holiday and wondered if you could give me some information about tours.
Yes, of course. Is there anything particular you're interested in?
Well, I heard there was a glowworm tour.
Yes, indeed. It's $93 and lasts for 3 hours.
And what are the main activities?
Well, the first thing is traveling to the other side of the lake.
You mean by boat?
No, it's the little train that runs along the shore of the lake. It's very popular.
Oh, my children will love that.
And that's how you get round to the caves. This is where the glowworms live. So you spend some time exploring the caves and looking at the remarkable lights and patterns given off by the worms in the dark.
That does sound interesting. And any other information?
Oh, just one thing. How old are your children?
7 and 10. Why?
No, that's okay. It's just that children must be 5 or older to go in the caves. Otherwise, they might get scared in the dark. But yours will be fine.
Okay, well, that's one to think about. And what about Silver Fjord? That's so famous. We'd like to go there.
Well, a day trip costs $220.
And how do we travel down to the fjord? Fly?
That's a lot more expensive, I'm afraid. On this tour, you go in a coach. It's about a 2-hour drive through fantastic scenery.
Do we get a break? I think my children might get a bit bored.
Yes, you stop at Easton.
That's to take a walk, is it?
Yes, there's a nice path by the river. You stop in Easton for half an hour, so there's plenty of time.
That sounds nice.
So then you get down to Silver Fjord, and you really spend most of the day going for a cruise on the fjord. It's spectacular mountain scenery, and you also cruise past a huge waterfall, which is another highlight of the day.
Well, that does sound amazing. And should we bring our own food, or is lunch provided?
No, lunch is included. It's a barbecue on the boat.
And what about marine life?
Yes, you'll definitely see seals.
Dolphins?
No, not in that part of the country. But if you're lucky, there will be whales as well.
Oh, well, my kids would absolutely love that.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Then another popular option is the High Country Tour. That's $105.
Oh, I heard about this. You visit a historic home, don't you?
Yes, that's right, and they serve you lunch.
Is that actually inside the house?
No, at this time of year it'll be the garden, which is really pretty.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Yes, it's a really great meal apparently.
And what about in the afternoon?
You go up and have a look around the farm. It's just close to the house. So if you're from the city, it's a chance to really see what life is like here. The High Country Tour gets excellent reviews from visitors.
Great! So then what about the zip line? My children really want to do that. How much is it?
The zip line is $75.
And is it safe?
Absolutely. You are suspended from the wire in a special harness, and then you just glide down the wire.
My friend said that below you've got this amazing ancient forest.
That's right, and it's really special to see it from above. Not something we do very often if you think about it.
No, I suppose that's true. And, how fast do you go?
Hang on, I've got the information here. 68 kilometers an hour.
That doesn't mean much to me. What's that in miles?
Oh yes, it's here. In miles per hour, it's about 43.
Wow! My kids will definitely want to do that. Okay, well look, I'll just talk it over with my husband and...
That is the end of part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers. Exam Practice Test 6, Listening Part 2. You will hear a guide talking to a group of people who are visiting an open-air museum. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Well, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Wilford Living Museum. Before you look around, I'd like to tell you a bit about the history of Wilford and the purpose of the museum. Well, if we go back to the early 1800s, Wilford was very different to what you see today. At that time, the forests had already been cut down, but there were no large urban settlements here, just a few small villages. And this whole area was a place where local people kept animals or grew crops. Those were the only economic activities. But then, in 1830, something happened in Wilford that transformed the area. The discovery of rich deposits of coal and other minerals opened up many commercial possibilities. Mines were built so these deposits could be brought to the surface. Then a canal was constructed so that canal boats could transport the minerals to other regions. Finally, a railway was built through Wilford in the 1850s, creating many new opportunities. By the 1870s, Wilford had become an important manufacturing centre. A few factories successfully produced fabrics from cotton and wool. However, what Wilford was best known for was manufacturing all sorts of tools, machinery and other items out of iron and steel. The attempt to set up a pottery industry here, however, making items for the home out of clay, was never really a success. So, for the next 100 years or so, Wilford was a thriving industrial region. However, by the 1970s, the old industries here were in decline. Much of the land at this site wasn't being used, so the local council decided to set up a living museum here. The idea was for visitors to be able to walk around and visit the sorts of factories, shops, homes and schools that were once found here. When the museum first opened in 1976, 2,000 visitors came on the first weekend alone. Since then, visitor numbers have just grown and grown. They now stand at 300,000 per year, and we anticipate further growth in the years to come. In fact, just recently, we welcomed our 9 millionth visitor, which was an exciting day for us. As well as our regular visitors, the museum has a number of other uses. We work closely with universities, whose staff consult the range of documents and artefacts we hold here. As well as that, those making movies and television shows often come to the museum because it makes a great set for historical scenes. There's even a possibility in future we may open up the museum for weddings and other private events.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
OK, so if you take out your maps, I'll just point out a few places you might like to visit. So right now, we're standing in the ticket office at the bottom of your maps. So, one place I'd recommend is the Old Bakery. This is a typical bakery from this area from about 100 years ago. To get there from the ticket office, walk up Stafford Street and then turn into Rigby Road. Walk down Rigby Road. There are a few interesting places along the way, and the old bakery is right next to the canal. Another interesting place is the doctor's surgery. This was moved here brick by brick and rebuilt on the museum site. Walk up Stafford Street until you reach the dock. You see the cafe. Walk past that and the doctor's surgery is just there. Cooper's Cottage is also fascinating. A worker's cottage from the 19th century. Walk up Stafford Street and take the first turning on the left. The road curves round to the west, then south as it climbs Jack's Hill. You'll pass a few little houses on the way up, and Cooper's Cottage is right on the summit of Jack's Hill. The stables are also great. This is where they kept all the horses. Again, walk up Stafford Street to the dock and turn right. Walk round the dock till you get to the canal, then cross the bridge over the canal to reach the stables. Also, be sure to visit the old school. So, walk northeast up through the museum, and it's not too far. The old school is right on the corner of Stafford Street and Rigby Road. Now, one other thing that I need to mention.
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Exam Practice Test 6, Listening, Part 3. You will hear 2 commerce students called Stella and Nathan talking about the importance of market research in business. First, you have time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Nathan. Shall we compare ideas for our assignment on market research?
Good idea. So first in the assignment, I think we should explain what market research is. One definition I found was this: gathering information about consumers' needs and preferences.
I like that. Nice and clear. So then, we need to establish the benefits of market research. Why do it? I read that many business people think it's about finding the next market they can exploit, but it's more complex than that.
I agree. To me, it's about unpredictability. Markets can change unexpectedly, but if you've done research, you can minimise the chance that something will go wrong in your own business.
That's a really significant point. You may also learn the most effective means of promoting your business.
But that depends on the business. It's not a general advantage.
No, you're right. But I do think the sums you invest in market research, you'll see a return on that eventually.
That's it exactly. Great point. The trouble is, too many of those working in business take a short-term view.
OK, so there are benefits. But there are criticisms of market research as well. We should acknowledge that in the assignment.
But some criticisms are more valid than others.
Like?
Well, apparently some managers say they're just too busy. But that's a poor excuse.
Maybe they think they already know everything they need to know.
Maybe they do, but that's an issue with them, not with market research.
OK, fair enough. But I read an interesting study out of the USA showing that the results of a lot of market research are just unreliable. The supposed developments identified by the research never occur.
Yes, that's a good point. Then another question is, can businesses actually see if market research is working? I mean, is it possible for a business to say categorically that increased profits resulted from market research?
But that's a criticism of how businesses are structured, not research itself.
Yeah, okay. Though you've got to admit, market researchers love jargon. These are examples from one report I read. Psychographics, cool hunting, and asynchronous research. Some people are bound to be put off by these terms.
Yes, that's a reasonable complaint.
So, what about sources of information for market research? Which sources of information work best? I mean, we all know that putting cameras in stores tells us a lot about consumer behaviour.
Yes, that's well documented. But I read that managers can learn a lot about social trends just by doing really obvious things, like keeping up with the news on TV, radio and digital networking sites. I hadn't thought it could be that simple.
No, me neither. Then there's a lot of data put out by bodies like the National Census and the Civil Service. That can be helpful.
Maybe, but it depends on the business. What I hadn't expected, though, was the evidence showing that talking to consumers directly about their preferences really works.
Yeah, I was a bit taken aback when I read that. But apparently it's more effective than internet questionnaires and polls.
I think people are less likely to be honest in questionnaires.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
All right, so if a business wants to use its own resources for market research, what's the process?
Good question. Let's think about a company that isn't using outside consultants, but doing it internally. Then I think the first step is staff education. You've got to get all employees committed to maximise the chances of success.
Agreed. Then you need to show staff examples of what they can do every day.
You mean in their interactions with customers?
Yes. What precisely should they ask customers in order to get valuable information? Show staff the sorts of things they can ask on a daily basis.
OK. And next, I was reading an article by the BQR group. Apparently, staff need to keep an account of what the customers are saying.
You mean on computer or by hand?
The format doesn't matter. But say every Friday they should add to the document, so they build up a picture of customer opinions, and the insights aren't lost.
Good point. Right, next, I read about ways of motivating staff. Business Guide magazine had a report on the importance of maintaining motivation.
So, what? By looking ahead and deciding what to do next?
Well, in fact, Business Guide's approach is to get your staff together around a table as frequently as possible to discuss their findings.
That sounds like a good approach. Next, you need to provide detailed feedback about any changes you decide, so everyone can see the outcomes of the research.
Nice idea. Then you have to ensure continued participation by the staff. You want market research to be ongoing, not just a one-off.
Oh, this is the idea of delegating, so that each staff member is accountable for market research in one area of the business.
Yeah, exactly. And then another aspect of this is the fact...
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Exam Practice Test 6, Listening Part 4. You will hear a biology student talking about water and how much people need to drink each day. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hi, everyone. My presentation today is looking at drinking water. Now, we know that water is a vital nutrient for human life. But exactly how much of it do we need to drink? Well, today I'm going to review some of the research. So, for example, there's a common idea that we should drink 8 glasses of water every day. But researchers say that the 8 glasses a day rule is a myth. Some people might need more than 8 glasses, some a lot less. The only group for whom the rule is useful seems to be the elderly, because they don't always feel thirsty, even when their bodies are actually short of water. So for them, 8 glasses a day might be a good rough guide. Okay, let's look next at what effects water has on the body. One issue of interest is weight loss. And there are lots of theories about this. It's been claimed that dieters should drink more at nighttime, or drink when they first wake up. But there's no research to back this up. But actually, there is some evidence from studies to show that subjects who drank a lot of water and then had their meals lost more weight. But that may only be because the water filled them up and reduce their appetites. I also read some of the research done by Dr. Amaldi, who's looked in depth at this whole issue of drinking water. And one of his studies does support the common claim that water is good for the stomach. In particular, it seems to increase the rate at which digestion takes place, which overall has a number of health benefits. Another interesting study I read about took place in the US, and this one was investigating the effects of dehydration. That is, not having enough water in the body. And what the US study indicated was that when a subject was low on water, their body's ability to regulate its own temperature was compromised, compared to a properly hydrated subject. Now there's another frequent claim about water that I was interested in looking into. But in my reading anyway, I could find no evidence at all to support the idea that hydration improves or enhances the skin in any specific way. So that claim may be a bit of a myth as well. Another interesting aspect of this concerns the brain. And I read about a couple of research studies investigating how water intake may affect brain function. In the first study, the research subjects were female, and the less hydrated group were affected more frequently by headaches compared to those who drank more water. In the second study, the research subjects were all male, and this time a lack of water in the body was associated with a number of findings. In particular, the subjects in this group reported increased feelings of anxiety when dehydrated. So, in summary, we can see that, yes, there are some health benefits from drinking plenty of water, but in many of these studies, the benefit was quite small. And it's probably true that in general, on the internet and so on, the benefits of drinking lots of water are overstated. But what about the opposite? Can you drink too much water? Well, it's possible, but it's not a common problem. Actually, the human body kind of prevents us drinking too much. Australian researchers discovered that when subjects were fully hydrated, they actually found swallowing problematic. their bodies just wouldn't allow it so easily. So that's an interesting finding. It is true that people do occasionally become sick from drinking too much water, although it is rare. So there are recorded instances of illness among athletes who have been encouraged to drink a lot, for example. According to doctors, people who have drunk too much water too quickly have become what's called hyponatremic. Basically, this means that the makeup of their blood has changed, and it now contains such a high proportion of salt that they suffer an adverse effect. But it's very rare for this sort of hyponatremia to be a dangerous condition. So, based on the reading I've done, the best advice is to trust your body. Drink water when you're thirsty, but you probably don't need to drink more often than that.
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.